Good evening. I welcome all of you on behalf of Pusa Road CP Study Circle on today's webinar in issues in ITC under GST. And on this subject, our honorable and very learned CA Ashok Batra ji with us. I welcome you, sir. I also welcome Hemant Pavaji and a special invitee CA Aswani Jindal ji from Jalandhar and all the attendee. As you know that there are lot of myths whether इसका क्रेडिट मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा, इसका क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा तो क्या पेनल्टी लगेगी या क्या होगी, उस सब की क्वेश्चन का हम सर से आज आंसर लेंगे। और अश्वनी जी से ज्यादा सर को कोई जानता नहीं है, तो आई विल रिक्वेस्ट टू अश्वनी जी काइंडली इंट्रोड्यूस आवर स्पीकर सर अशोक बत्रा जी सर।
थैंक यू राजेश भाई, राजेश अग्रवाल जी, हमारे फाउंडर नॉट ओनली पूसा स्टडी सर्कल, एक और स्टडी सर्कल है, राजेश जी दो स्टडी सर्कल चला रहे हैं हमारे, और हेमंत पावा जी, आयुष जी और सिद्धांत पाठक जी। बत्रा जी को मैं तब लास्ट में ले रहा हूं क्योंकि बत्रा जी के बारे में क्या बोल रहे हैं, क्योंकि इनके बारे में जब बोलने लगे तो फिर बाकी पांचों रह जाएंगे, क्योंकि इतना बड़ा बायोडाटा है। मैं तो बड़ा शॉर्ट में ही पढ़ूंगा। तभी मैं इनसे पूछ रहा था कि हमारे लिए दो ही गुरु हैं, डायरेक्ट और इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स। डायरेक्ट टैक्स में गुरु जी हैं ही हैं, तो अभी इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स के जीएसटी गुरु हमारे अशोक बत्रा जी हैं। तो अब गुरु जी को हमने डबल उपाधि दे देनी है। मैंने तभी बत्रा जी से कंफर्म कर लिया जब मैं बायोडाटा देख रहा था श्री राम कॉलेज, तो मैं कहा गुरु जी को कह देना गुरुओं के गुरु, गुरु घंटाल, गुरु जी का नाम अब गुरु घंटाल कर देना है, गिरीश उज्जा जी का। तो अशोक बत्रा जी बिकम चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट इन 1981। तो बड़े सर पुराने हैं चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट, रादर मतलब ही हैज हैविंग द गुड एक्सपीरियंस, रादर लार्ज ग्रेजुएट इन द ईयर 2009। और सर आप भी डॉक्टरेट परस्यू कर रहे हो या नहीं?
प्रोसेस में थे, छोड़ दिया।
अच्छा, छोड़ दिया।
जीएसटी में जब जीएसटी आ गई ना तो फिर छोड़ दिया।
चलो बड़ा बढ़िया है कि आपको रामदेव जी की गालियां नहीं पड़ी, नहीं तो डॉक्टरों को सबको पड़ी हैं, वो बीच में ही है डॉक्टरेट भी। He is also alumni of Shri Ram College of Commerce, most prestigious college in the country, rather in the Asia. He completed his graduation in 1977. Presently, he is the partner, rather senior partner and owner of Messrs. A.K. Batra and Associate, a chartered accountant firm established in 1982. He has excellent academic credential and vast exposure in the field of taxation. हम सब जानते ही हैं कि सर्विस टैक्स हो चाहे जीएसटी हो, बत्रा जी का मोर देन 38 रादर 40 इयर्स एक्सपीरियंस इस फील्ड में है। ऐसे ना हो कि मेरे पास बायोडाटा 5 साल पुराना हो, अभी 43 का हो गया हो। तो बत्रा जी का एक्सपीरियंस इतना पुराना है जीएसटी में। तो जीएसटी मॉडल जीएसटी लॉ पे भी बत्रा जी ने पूरे प्रोफेशन को गाइड किया है, और इनकी जीएसटी लॉ पे, सर्विस टैक्स लॉ पे बुक्स आती हैं। बुक्स तो देखो बहुत की आती हैं, सबसे बढ़िया ये है कि बत्रा जी इज मोस्ट एंड ऑलवेज अवेलेबल टू एवरी प्रोफेशनल। कोई भी इनको कभी भी फोन करता है, ही सो हम्बली रिप्लाई टू एवरीवन। अगर ये मिस भी हो जाएगा फोन तो ये ऑलवेज कॉल बैक, और किसी प्रोफेशनल को मतलब इनकी सलाह जो होगी वो ऐसे ही होगी जैसे हम पेड क्लाइंट को देते हैं, वो अपने प्रोफेशनल्स को भी विदाउट चार्जिंग एनीथिंग ऐसे ही अपना भाई समझते हैं और सलाह देते हैं। इनकी नंबर ऑफ बुक्स आर अवेलेबल इन द मार्केट। रादर मैं तो बत्रा जी को कहता हूं कि आपकी जितनी बुक्स रिलीज करता हूं, इनको साल का 50 लाख का बिल भेजता हूं मैं कि सर रिलीज कर दी है मैंने आपकी बुक, आप काम निकाला करो, उतना मेरा बिल बढ़ता जाएगा रिलीज करने का। तो बत्रा जी एसोसिएटेड विद इंस्टीट्यूट सभी कमेटीज, चाहे वो इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स कमेटी है तो वो प्रेस्टिजियस मेंबर है, क्योंकि इंस्टीट्यूट ऑलवेज इनको फर्स्ट प्रेस्टिजियस मेंबर इनको लेती है, क्योंकि इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स में इनसे ऊपर कोई भी नहीं है। रादर इंस्टीट्यूट के ऊपर जब जीएसटी लगना था, नहीं लगना था, ही वाज वन ऑफ द एडवाइजर कि जी इंस्टीट्यूट की मेंबरशिप फीस के ऊपर लगना है या नहीं लगना है। इन्होंने ही वो क्लैरिटी दी कि क्या होगा और उसका क्रेडिट मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा। और वन ऑफ द क्लाइंट्स जो मैं इनके बायोडाटा में देखो, महानगर निगम लिमिटेड हो या पंजाब नेशनल बैंक हो, बड़े मतलब ऐसे तो ये तो एक दो है, तो ऐसे बड़े बड़े बहुत क्लाइंट हैं जिनको बत्रा जी ऑलरेडी सर्विसेज और एडवाइजरी दे रहे हैं। विद दीज वर्ड आई रिक्वेस्ट बत्रा जी, और टॉपिक भी आज उनका इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट है, जो मोस्ट डिफिकल्ट टॉपिक है कि क्या क्रेडिट मिलना है क्या नहीं मिलना। जब हमने फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर के मुंह से सुना था तो वो तो कहते थे फ्री फ्लो ऑफ क्रेडिट, लेकिन वो फ्री फ्लो में अभी बहुत से ब्लॉकेज आ गए हैं। जैसे दिल्ली जाते समय किसान आंदोलन है, ऐसे इसमें भी बड़े आंदोलन है। तो ये फ्री फ्लो कैसे मिलेगा, ये बत्रा जी हमें गाइड करेंगे। थैंक यू वेरी मच, ओवर टू बत्रा जी।
Thank you, Ashok ji, for the nice introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank USA Road CP Study Circle for providing this opportunity, particularly Rajesh ji, who has always been in touch. I think I know him for last 20 years now. And it is already 14:15. So without wasting any time, I would like to share my screen with you so that we can start the topic of the day. Friends, today's topic is input tax credit. Input tax credit is the only provision in GST law which is beneficial for the assessees. What is input tax credit? The amount of GST which you have paid on the receipt of goods or services or both, which is not expensed or capitalized, but shown in the financial asset as a current asset. It can be used to discharge the liability of tax, except when you are liable to make payment under RCM, that it has to be paid in cash. It cannot be discharged through cash. It cannot be discharged through credit. It cannot be used for the payment of interest, penalty, fee, or any other sum. Again, I am cautioning you, this tax credit can be used only for the discharge of output tax liability, except RCM, and cannot be used for the purpose of making payment of interest, penalty, fee, or any other sum. These are such provisions where non-claim of tax credit will result into minimum loss of 70% of the amount of credit which you have failed to claim. I'll give you a small example. There's a telephone invoice of 100 rupees, 18 rupees the GST charge on that. If you expense that 118 rupees, then your 18 rupees is gone. Yes, you will be able to reduce your income tax on that 18 rupees, which is the additional expense available to you when you expense it. So the amount which I have failed to claim minus my income tax liability, there may be a situation when my income is not liable to be taxed, but I'm liable to GST, certainly full loss. If I am a assessee who is liable to pay tax at 30%, then the loss may be restricted to 70%. I have carry forward loss, full loss. So non-claim of tax credit is a huge financial loss to the assessee who has failed to claim it. Then excess claim of credit is equally dangerous. In normal situation, if you claim 100 rupees in excess, then you are liable to pay interest at the rate of 24%, penalty equivalent to the amount of tax involved, and tax of course is gone. So there is a huge penalty in case you claim excess tax credit. And at the same time, sometimes there are certain services where concessional rate of tax is available. Subject to the condition, you cannot claim the credit. For example, GTA. So now, in case you have inadvertently claimed certain credit in GTA, then your whole amount, which is payable at 5% at concessional rate of tax, will become payable at full rate. For example, in GST, the rate of GTA is 12% under forward charge with credit. You are discharging liability at 5% concessional rate of tax, but inadvertently you have claimed a credit of only 500 rupees. Now, rather than the department asking you to pay 500, they can ask you, you have to pay the tax on the output tax liability at a full rate at 12%. Assuming your business is 1 crore, you are liable to pay 5 lakh. Now they will ask you to pay 12 lakh rupees minus the credit which is available to you. So that means it has got a huge financial burden in case you claim a tax in excess of what is not required under the law. And particularly in case where your lower rate of deduction is based on the condition that credit cannot be availed. In today's world, when it is a huge competition, I personally feel the claim of tax credit in most of the business situation is always less than the amount of profit. So in case of wrong claim of credit, as I explained it to you, the wrong claim of credit of 100 will become 300 rupees when the show cause notice will come along with interest and penalty. So you cannot afford to pay that. So you need to be very, very cautious while claiming the GST. Neither it should be underclaimed, nor it should be overclaimed. The scheme of ITC in GST is entirely different as compared to our rest while law. This is very, very important to understand. This is one of the basic principles. Earlier on, if you look at VAT, you were entitled to claim tax on turnover of purchases which are being used for the purpose of making taxable sale. Even under excise and service tax, you were eligible for the input service, inputs or capital goods which are being used for the purpose of output supply or making a final product under excise. But now, under GST, it is linked with the business. All credit is available in the course or furtherance of business. The taxable event is being dispensed with. So the scope has been vastly increased. Kindly try to appreciate. Under GST, the credit is available when those supplies are being used in the course of furtherance of business. Earlier on, it was for making taxable sale, output supply, or manufacture of final product. So the basis of allowing credit under GST has increased. Further, this law is being enacted keeping in view the fact that the matching has to be done through computers. Therefore, the word used or intended to be used is being used in the eligibility section of section 16, which we will discuss when we come to that section. Now, if I purchase certain equipment, though it may not be used right now, I am eligible for the full credit in the month in which those equipments are being purchased. Unlike income tax, where the assets has to be kept ready for use, then only you are eligible. Here, the use is not there. Why? It is simply because if the government give you credit on the basis of utilization of the asset, then keeping track of those events was not at all possible. So the government want to track each and every invoice. So they said you can get the credit in the month in which you purchase the goods, even if you don't use it. Therefore, the term used or intended to be used is there. By doing so, the government can look at the whole chain and observe no credit is being taken twice against a single invoice. So matching of invoice on the computer. I just want to give you a word of caution when we'll proceed through the slides. The earlier case law, you have to read most of the principles are the same and the ratio is equally applicable under GST also. But wherever this matching concept is there, which was not there, and wherever the taxable event part is there, that is entirely different. As I told you, now it is linked with the business. Earlier on it was the taxable event under the law. These are the sections. You all know 16 to 21, section 49 and 41, and more important 155. Normally it is not being talked about. This section put an onus on the person to prove that he is eligible for the claim of credit. So the government has shifted the onus to you in case it is a self-assessment regime. In case you want to claim any credit on any supply, so it is for you to prove that you are eligible for that credit. The government has nothing to do with that. Section 49 talk about payment of taxes. We all understand how this CGST, SGST or IGST to be used. CGST cannot be used for the discharge of SGST. So this is subject to section 49. And finally 41. It says you will be given a provisional credit. Why they are saying provisional credit? Simply because of the fact that the conditions which are there in section 62 need not be satisfied on the day when you are receiving the invoice and when you are receiving the goods. For example, I have to make payment within 180 days, so the period is there. Without making the payment, I can claim the credit. Similarly, I am supposed to file my return, which will be falling due on the next month. Similarly, the tax has to be paid by the supplier. That can also be done subsequent to the date of purchase. For example, in the month of March, I am supposed to make the payment by 20th April. So on the date when I am claiming the credit, all the conditions did not be satisfied. But yes, in the due course of time, it need to be satisfied. Then friends, what is input tax credit for which we are entitled? Input tax में क्या क्या include होता है? IGST, रिवर्स चार्ज, चाहे वो IGST में हो, चाहे वो SGST में हो, चाहे वो यूनिट टेरिटरी टैक्स में हो, but it does not include the composition levy. We all understand when we are discharging liability under composition, then no credit is available. And similarly, the recipient of supplies from the composition dealer can also not avail the credit. And that is why it has been provided in the law that composition dealer will have to issue a bill of supply. He cannot issue a tax invoice. Otherwise, tax invoice is to be issued. Either it is a B2B transaction or it is a B2C transaction. So barring the composition levy, this input tax credit include these following taxes, as I told you: IGST, CGST, SGST, and UTGST, and the tax paid under reverse charge. And reverse charge both are being covered. Either it is supplies from the unregistered person or the specified supplies on which reverse charge is made liable to be taxed. Now the subject matter is availment of credit on capital goods, inputs, and input service. If you look at the definition of capital goods, it says the value of which is capitalized in the books of accounts, and other than capital goods are input. So meaning thereby you are eligible for all the credit on the goods. Either it is capital or input, and all the credits are available in the month of purchase. Then your question can be, if that being so, then why this distinction is being made? Why the goods are being classified into two categories, input and capital goods? Uska reason bada simple hai. Whenever it is a capital goods, you have to evaluate the life. Then the life of the capital good has been treated as 5 years, which is 5% deduction for each quarter. Similarly, when goods are going to the job worker, there's a different time period when they should come back. In the case of capital goods, 3 years. In the case of input, it is 1 year. So that is the purpose of dividing all the goods into inputs and capital goods. Otherwise, so far as claim of credit is concerned, there is no difference. Unlike in the past, where there have been restrictions. For example, in DVAT, we used to get the credit on capital goods in 3 years. In excise and service tax, we used to get the credit 2 years. Now there is no such distinction, and we can claim the credit in the month in which it is purchased. And this distinction is only for the purpose of sending goods to the job worker. Wherever we have to evaluate the value of capital goods, it has to be taken 5 years. Barring that, no distinction at all. Input service, any service used or intended to be used in the course or furtherance of business. This furtherance of business is also very, very important thing to note. Very recently, I think only 3 days down the line in Madras, in Chhattisgarh High Court, in the case of Balco, a question came: if I have paid GST on the receipt of supply of coal, and that coal is being used for the purpose of generation of electricity, and that electricity is being consumed in a residential colony adjacent to the factory, which is in remote area. So the having of residential colony when the factory itself is in remote area, the question arose whether they are eligible for the credit or not. An interim order has been passed where he has been asked to pay a small amount of tax and rest is being stayed. The matter is yet to be adjudicated. So in the furtherance of business, what is the meaning of furtherance of business is as further being subject to scrutiny of the court, and in the times to come, very interesting cases will develop in that. Now I'll just tell you some of the basic fundamental principles which were applicable in the restoral regime pre-GST era and also on the GST regime also. Input tax credit, one available, it is indivisible. Dal Ichi Karagaria Limited, Supreme Court, as old case as in 1999. No demand can be made for the recovery of credit which has been availed rightly at the time of availment, Eicher Motors against Supreme Court. credit of ITC. This is a very latest judgment because there have been a lot of questions whether it is my statutory right, whether it is a fundamental right, whether it is a facility to me, whether it's a benefit given to me. So in the case of ALD automobile, the Supreme Court very clearly said it is not an absolute right, it is a conditional right. You are eligible for the credit subject to the conditions. And similarly, if you look at the dispute with regard to the refund of credit on capital goods, wherein the Gujarat High Court has gone in favor of the SSC and Madras High Court has gone against the SSC, and the matter is pending for the Honorable Supreme Court. The same thing is there. It is a conditional right. Government can put reasonable conditions, and that is why 17(5) provision, which deals with the block credit, is not being challenged. So it is the additional right, and then classification cannot be challenged in the hands of the recipient. So therefore, let us say you have made purchase of a supply on which the tax is liable to be paid at 12%, but your supplier has charged 18%. Now the question is whether you are eligible for the amount tax or the amount of credit of the tax which is being paid or which is payable. I will deal with that subject also when I come to section 16. But according to the judicial pronouncement, not one, I am giving judgment of Gujarat High Court, Madras High Court and Supreme Court, wherein they clearly said that you cannot challenge the classification in the hand of recipient, even if he has paid tax at a higher rate than the rate at which it was leviable. He is eligible for the credit for the higher rate also. A dispute which is going on, the litigation has not yet been over. Therefore, yesterday also a builder was sitting with me asking for the same thing. Do I need to reverse the credit of unsold flat? Because the occupancy certificate has been received now. In the case of Olympic Limited, Gujarat High Court, they said no, because at the time when he availed the credit, it was as per the provisions of law, the principle which I have already told you. Now the matter is pending before the Supreme Court. Wherever, dear friends, as a professional, I say the only difference between the advocate and the chartered accountant is we have to guide to your client, wherein they have to do their business on day-to-day basis. As an advocate, I say if the litigation is there, I'll contest it. That will not work because they have to issue invoice on the very next day because they are carrying on their business. So my humble suggestion is let us take a very conservative view whenever there is a eligibility of the credit. Why to take any risk? For example, I am liable to pay tax on RCM. That is certainly an input service. Then I need not go into the merit whether this tax is leviable or not. Let me pay the tax and claim the credit. Another myth which is there, and I received a lot of questions on that. The question is, if I pay tax under RCM, will I be entitled for the input tax credit? Certainly, you will be entitled for the input tax credit. Not only in those cases where you are paying tax at full rate, like in the case of advocate, if you are paying tax at 18%, you are eligible to claim the credit. In the case of transporter, where there are two options, you can pay the tax either at 12% with claim of credit and 5% without claim of credit. In both these situations, mark my word, in both these situations, whatever amount of tax you will pay, either it is full or it is concessional rate, you are eligible for the credit. ये नहीं हो सकता कि आप टैक्स 5% दें और क्लेम 12% कर लें, क्योंकि आपका ड्यूटी बैंक डॉक्यूमेंट होना चाहिए, उस पर टैक्स शो होना चाहिए, लेकिन उसने 5% कंसेशनल रेट ऑफ टैक्स चार्ज किया है, इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि उसने कंसेशनल रेट पे लिया है, उसको आईटीसी नहीं मिलेगा, तो आपको भी आईटीसी नहीं मिलेगा. ऐसा नहीं है. If a transporter is charging you tax at a concessional rate of 5%, he is not eligible to claim the credit, but whatever tax you have paid, that is 5%, you are certainly eligible for the credit. Mark my words. These are very, very important. Then there is again a fundamental principle. If you are satisfying the substantive condition, then Senvert credit cannot be denied for want of procedural lapses. आपके पास एक डीलर के 10 इनवॉइस हैं, 8 पे नंबर ठीक है, 2 पे नंबर गलत हो गया. या उस पर डेट गलत मेंशन हो गई या जीएसटी नंबर में कहीं टाइपोग्राफिकल एरर हो गया, तो जब ई इनवॉइसिंग आ रही है तो शायद वो प्रॉब्लम खत्म हो जाएगी टाइपोग्राफी वाली, बिकॉज इट विल कैरी द इमेज, बट टिल दैट डेट बिकॉज दैट इज एप्लीकेबल ओनली इन द केस ऑफ लिमिटेड नंबर ऑफ असेसेस, तो उन सब वजह से आपका क्रेडिट नहीं जा सकता. These are some of the fundamental principles which will continue to rule even in GST era. Now friends, let's come to the sections. First section is section 16, subsection 1. The words, it starts with the word every registered person, meaning thereby if you are not registered, you are not liable to pay the tax. You can say, sir, if I am not registered, then I am not liable to pay the tax also. How does it affect me? It certainly affects you. There is a difference between the taxable person and the registered person. Registered person is one who is registered with the department in terms of section 25, but taxable person is the one who is liable to pay the tax. Suppose you are a chartered accountant, your turnover exceeds 20 lakh rupees, you are a taxable person, but you fail to get yourself registered. So you will be liable to pay tax on your output tax liability. Then there will be a double jeopardy. Whatever credit is available to you, that will also not be available because you are not registered. So in case the department catches you, then you are in double jeopardy. Number one, you are liable to pay tax on your output supplies, but you will not get the credit on the supplies which has been used for the purpose of making taxable supplies, because it is available only to registered person. Why I am emphasizing on this word? Because in SENVET, it was not a condition earlier. In VAT, it has always been the same case. The credit was available only to the registered person, but in excise and service tax, it was not important. Then in the manner prescribed in section 49, as I told you, deal with the payment, be entitled to take credit of input tax charge. We have understood what is input tax. It is all IGST, CGST, etc. Used or intended to be used. This is what I have been emphasizing. Now, not only for the purpose of business, but for the purpose of, not for the purpose of use, but also intended to be used. That is why I told you it is being drafted in such a manner, because the government wants each invoice to be monitored, and therefore they say you are entitled for the credit on the receipt of invoice rather than on the use of it, so that each invoice can be matched. Then in the course of furtherance of business, not only in the course of business, but furtherance of business. Course of business means an activity which you carry out for the purpose of carrying out your business. But in case you want to further your business, you do certain research and development. You try to set up a new line of business or anything you want to expand. And as I told you in the case of Chhattisgarh, they say having a residential colony in remote area is also furtherance of business. So all these things need to be there, but there is no doubt with the use of the term furtherance, they have expanded the scope of credit, and most likely, in my humble understanding, it is the court which will interpret in the times to come. But there are certain areas where we can certainly say it is for the furtherance of business. For example, right now, we are passing through a difficult phase of pandemic. Certain pharma company spend a lot of money on research and development to develop a vaccine. Those who have been able to develop, they will certainly get benefit of it. But those who are not been able to sustain, suppose their all research and development goes in vain, their efforts goes waste, still they will be eligible to claim the credit on those expenditure which they have incurred for the development of the vaccine, even though they have not been able to develop. Similarly, whatever expenditure we incurred under corporate social responsibility, which is also being mandated by law, that is also for the furtherance of business. Maybe it is not in the course of business, but income tax law as mandated, you have to incur that expenditure. If I have to incur it, the requirement of the law, then it may fall in furtherance of business, the credit will be available. Now, I was telling you, in case you have paid excess tax, even then you will be eligible to the credit. I was giving you an example, your product is liable to be taxed at 12%, you paid 18. So this section 16 support that. Kindly see the word charge, it is not chargeable. They could have used that word because in VAT law, they used to say tax payable under the law, under the act, you are eligible for the credit. But now it is not so. Here it says whatever amount has been charged. So you're liable to pay tax on the amount charged and not the amount chargeable. So even if your supplier has charged you inadvertently wrong rate of tax, or he has charged tax on the supply which was not liable to be taxed, even then you are eligible for the credit, and this wording of charge prove my contention. You are eligible for the credit in the month of purchase. One-to-one correlation is not being required. Business has been defined in section 217, which includes the activities in connection with commencement or closure of business. It is very important. By doing so, they have plugged certain rules, loopholes. At the same time, they have made sure that any expenditure which is being incurred for the setting up of a business shall also be eligible as a credit. But the credit is available to the registered person. Now the question comes, if I have not started supplying the goods, I am not liable to register, then how will I get the credit? Sir, look at subsection 3 of section 25, which deal with the voluntary registration, that clearly specifies that you can take voluntary registration. So in a case where I am setting up a business, I can take voluntary registration under section 25(3), and once I do that, then whatever supplies I receive, which will be ultimately used for the purpose of my business, used or intended to be used, that also goes in parameteria with in consonance with the law, so that credit is available. When it comes to closure of business, why they have said so? Because earlier on in VAT law there was a loophole. I used to close down my business, then I surrender my registration certificate, and then I used to sell my machinery and equipment which has been left over. So I don't pay any VAT on that, though I might have purchased those at that point of time against the concessional rate of tax against statutory forms. Now I paid the tax, claim the credit. So the government has become wiser. They say in case you are purchasing the assets and claiming the credit at the time of purchase and you want to close down the business, then on the day of closure, it is being treated as if it has been supplied by you, and accordingly your tax liability will be calculated. So this clause is really important. Then credit can be used even for establishment of a new office which is not your line of business. I've already explained it to you. Similarly, research and development activity, I have already explained it to you. Now friends, we are coming to the most important section, section 16 subsection 2. I think all rules relating to this section, all conditions which has been prescribed here are subject to challenge before the high courts. Now it is really important to understand after reading 16.1, where the eligibility of credit is very vast, used or intended to be used in the course of furtherance of business by every registered person. Now what does it say? It starts with non-obstant clause, notwithstanding anything contained in this section. This is also important to note, because it says forget about whatever has been written in section 16(1), 3 or 4. कोई registered person को credit नहीं मिलेगा unless otherwise he satisfy the following conditions. If he has to satisfy the following condition and it is not subject to any other provisions of the section, then the question came whether 16(4), which prescribes the time limit, whether that is mandatory. As per this section, you are eligible for the credit on all the supplies which has been received by you, provided you satisfy the following conditions. Notwithstanding anything contained in this section. So of course, 16(4), whatever it may say, you have to satisfy these conditions. Now these conditions are, number one, you should be in possession of a tax invoice or a debit note, which you call it a supplementary note also, issued by a registered person. Again, not only in order to avail the credit, but in order to avail the credit, you should be having an invoice issued by the registered person. Under reverse charge, self invoice is there. On the basis of payment, you can claim the credit. But so far as forward charge is concerned, you should have invoice or debit note or any other document which may be prescribed. And Rule 36 have already prescribed ISD invoice, bill of entry, and other documents which are duty paying documents. So you must have duty paying document in your possession. This is not the only condition. Rest of the conditions have also to be satisfied cumulatively. Then comes AA. This is the amendment which is being proposed in Finance Act 21. Of course, Finance Act has become, but this amendment has not yet been notified. So it is not at all applicable as on date. But still, I am telling you, this can be notified any day. So as per this, they have put up another condition that the detail of such invoice on the basis of which recipient is claiming a credit must be furnished by the supplier in his outward supply and communicated to the recipient in the manner prescribed under Section 37. That means if that credit is not being shown in GSTR 1 and correspondingly it doesn't come in your 2A or 2B, you are not eligible that credit. But this condition, again, I am cautioning you, it is not applicable as on today. It will be applicable only when the change will be notified. Now, condition number 2, he has received the goods or services or both. You say, sir, I am in possession of the invoice. Is it not sufficient enough to prove that I have received the goods and services? Certainly not. As I told you, that is one of the conditions. We have to satisfy all the conditions. The second condition is very, very important. And that condition is you must have received the goods or services or both. Meaning thereby, in addition to the invoice, another additional burden has been costed upon you, wherein you have to prove that the supplies on which I have claimed the credit have been received by me. In fact, you must be listening to this electronic media, news, newspapers, etc., that so many arrests have been made, so many frauds have been committed in the GST. It is only because of this provision. People are receiving the invoices without receiving the supply of goods and service, meaning thereby fake invoices are being received. In order to have dual benefit, first of all, when you claim that supply as an expense in your profit and loss account, your taxable income get reduced, income tax, and then you also get the ITC. So that is 100 rupees purchase, you save 40 rupees as income tax, 18 rupees as GST, 58 rupees. And the cost of obtaining that invoice is only a fraction of this. And that is the reason so many frauds are being committed. And it is a big challenge for the government. The topic is not that, so I will not deal much with this topic. Now I'll come to the fact that the onus is on you. How you can prove it? Certainly you can have detail with regard to the vehicle from which you have received the material. You should have a stock register. You should have production register. Or in the case of trader, you must have a stock register with the receipt and outgo is there. But the question comes, what will happen in the case of services? Services, there cannot be any evidence with regard to the receipt because they are intangible in nature. If that being so, you have to be very, very careful and at least maintain the record which is there. For example, the name of supplier, the nature of service, how it is being consumed, etc. Because as I told you, Section 155 put onus on you to prove that you are eligible for the credit. So this condition you have to satisfy. The onus is on you, for which the detailed records need to be maintained. Now, when we say you must have received, then there is an explanation inserted at this clause, wherein they say even the deeming receipt, if you are supplying goods to a job worker on behalf of the manufacturer, that is also being treated as a deemed receipt. Even that receipt may be through during the movement of goods or even after receipt of goods, or even these goods are not coming to your factory directly going to the job worker, you can say it is a deeming receipt by you and it can be transferred even by the ability, etc. There's no problem. Similar kind of provision is there with regard to services. If I am the recipient, but I say the beneficiary is my son, you provide him certain, let us say, coaching for the sports. I am liable to make the payment. The contract is between me and the person concerned, but the beneficiary is my son. So that is being deemed to have been received by me. Then comes conditional number 3. This condition is that subject to the provision of section 4143A, the supplier must have paid tax to the government. This is a provision which is being challenged before various high court, and the similar provisions were there in VAT, and Delhi High Court in the case of Arise India Limited said there can be two situations. One, where the recipient is a genuine buyer. He has received the goods, made the payment through banking channel. Certainly, you cannot deny the credit to him because you cannot expect an assessor to do an impossible task. And in the context of GST, particularly looking to the fact that your mechanism wherein his GST will come to me automatically, I'll verify, I will have a right to reject or accept that. That system has never come into force. So the law, while dealing with the VAT of Delhi government, it was having the paramateria, the law was paramateria, the language was exactly the same. So Delhi High Court has clearly said you cannot deny in the case of honest taxpayer. Yes, where the department can prove there is a connivance between the supplier and the recipient to defraud the revenue. In such situation, certainly you can do so. Similar kind of ruling has come from Bharat Aluminium Company Limited, Chhattisgarh High Court, Bharti Telecom Limited, Union of India, Delhi High Court, and a couple of other judgments also. When I'll come to the issues under GST, I'll deal that issue in detail at that point of time. But yes, this condition that the payment must be made, that is the different issue. We can utilize it in our benefit wherever we have inadvertently received certain supplies without goods and the department is asking me to reverse the credit. Then I can say, without admitting it's a fake invoice, I can say because he has not made the payment, I am reversing the credit, which will satisfy the GST department. And then you are not subject to penalty in income tax also under section 271 capital AD, double capital AD, 271 AAD. Then friends, the fourth condition is I must have paid service tax. I must have filed my return. No problem, I can pay the return. There is no problem. This is the fourth condition. And in this condition, a proviso has been added which clearly says in case you are receiving the goods in lot on installment, then the credit shall be available only when you receive the last installment. Now there are two arguments. In the case of supplier, he has to raise the invoice for the full quantity of goods to be supplied, though that supply has to go in 4 installments. Let us say I have to give you 1000 metric ton of coal every week. I start the first installment. I have to raise the invoice for the 44,000 ton of coal. Full value invoice has to be raised by me. But you are entitled to credit only when you receive the last. So government want to collect the tax at the earliest, wants to give you the credit at the last time. But this argument that you are entitled for the credit on the receipt of last installment is also in consonance with section 16(2) second condition that I must have received the goods and services. जब मैंने goods and services receive नहीं की तो नेचुरल मुझे क्रेडिट मिलना ही नहीं है. पर सरकार ने क्या किया, उन्होंने कहा कि सप्लायर तो टैक्स पहले दे दे, बिकॉज अगर 4 इंस्टॉलमेंट में माल देना है तो जो पहली इंस्टॉलमेंट चलेगी उसी टाइम उसको पूरा इनवॉइस देना है और सब्सिक्वेंट इंस्टॉलमेंट के साथ उसने फोटोकॉपी द इनवॉइस और डिलीवरी चलान लगा है. Now we coming to the proviso. I'll just read an important proviso. That proviso says, in case the recipient fails to pay. Why I'm focusing on these words? Because ultimately we have to find answers to these questions which comes to our mind. The law says fails to pay to the supplier of goods and services other than the supplies on which the tax is payable reverse charge. RCM पे applicable नहीं होगा. The amount towards the value of supply along with tax payable thereon. That means tax or supply की value दोनों within 180 days में अगर मैंने नहीं दी तो मुझे equivalent amount of tax credit has to be reversed. along with interest there. इसका कहने का मतलब ये है कि आपने 100 रुपए का इनवॉइस लिया, उस पर 18 रुपए जीएसटी था। आपको क्रेडिट तभी मिलेगा अगर आपने 118 रुपए उसको 180 दिन के अंदर दे दिए। इफ यू फेल टू पे, तो 180 दिन खत्म होने के बाद इमीडिएटली ऑन 1st ऑफ जुलाई, इफ द परचेज हैज टेकन प्लेस ऑन 1st ऑफ जनवरी, आपको 1 जुलाई को क्रेडिट रिवर्स करना पड़ेगा और इंटरेस्ट देना पड़ेगा। Then further proviso says that when you will make the payment, you will be eligible for the credit. Now, it appears to be a very simple thing. but यही एक क्वेश्चन है जिसके ऊपर मेरे पास हर सीए का बहुत फोन आते थे, पर्टिकुलरली जब 9C का इशू था और 9C सीए ने सर्टिफाई करना होता था। अब इसमें एक एक वर्ड एक देख लें, फेल्स टू पे अमाउंट towards taxable service along with interest. Now, I'll give you my analysis of this. First of all, it says it has to be 180 days from the date of invoice, not date from the date of receipt of goods. तो जो आपका माल गुवाहाटी से चला 1 अप्रैल को और आपको 10 अप्रैल को मिला, या बीच में किसान आंदोलन था, अश्विनी जी बार बार कह रहे थे, तो आपको 20 में मिला, तो हमें 180 दिन इनवॉइस की डेट से कैलकुलेट करना है। As per law, it is from the date of invoice, not from the date of receipt of goods. Then it is a self-disciplined mechanism wherein पोर्टल मुझे कुछ नहीं कहता, पोर्टल पे यहाँ कोई इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं जानी है, मुझे खुद ही एग्जामिन करना है कि मैंने 180 डेज में दिए या नहीं दिए पेमेंट। एक क्वेश्चन यही आता है कि पहले तो ये प्रोविजन एप्लीकेबल भी है या नहीं है, क्योंकि बीसी श्रीनिवास शेट्टी कहता है इफ द मैकेनिज्म इज नॉट बीइंग मेड डाउन इन द लॉ दैट द लॉ इज बैड इन लॉ। सो जब इन्होंने 1 2 3 का सिस्टम ही नहीं चलाया तो ये 180 डेज क्या एप्लीकेबल होना चाहिए। चलिए इसको अभी छोड़ देते हैं, बिकॉज इट इज अ लिटिगेशन इशू, फॉरगेट अबाउट दैट। व्हाट विल हैपन इफ आई हैव मेड 50% पेमेंट ऑफ द सप्लाई? 180 रुपए और 118 का बिल था, मैंने 45 रुपए दे दिए, 54 रुपए दे दिए, और दिस एक सिंपलिसिटी 54 ले लेते हैं, तो मुझे 50% क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा। मुझे जो रिवर्सल करना है वो उसी अमाउंट का करना है विच रिमेन्स अनपेड। ठीक है बाबा जी, जो अनपेड रह गया, चलिए कोई बात नहीं। अब इट सेज अलोंग विद इंटरेस्ट, so the question is interest really leviable? If I have claimed the credit and I have not utilized it, and the same amount of credit which I am entitled to reverse is always there in my credit ledger. Now the credit ledger is open to the government also. I am not manipulating it. Rather, the government has become my accountant and maintaining my credit ledger, so they can verify it. No interest in my opinion, because there is no loss of revenue. Then question comes, you go to section 53, it says in case you have claimed the credit wrongly, then interest payable is 24%. चलिए, but किस पीरियड का इंटरेस्ट देना है? अगर रेट का भी झगड़ा है, 18 और 24 है, I say it was a bona fide error, then it is 18% interest. If intentionally I have taken some credit wrongly, then it is 24% interest. Then question comes, for which period? Is it from the date of availment of credit or from the date of invoice? पेमेंट मुझे 180 डेज में करनी है, बट मैंने उसकी जो पेमेंट नहीं की, मुझे रिवर्स करना है, और सरकार को जो लॉस हुआ फाइनेंशियल डिफरेंसेस का, अगर मैंने क्रेडिट नहीं था और मैंने उसको यूज किया, तो मेरे हिसाब से जिस दिन मैंने अवेल किया उस दिन से इंटरेस्ट लगना चाहिए, ना कि फ्रॉम द डेट ऑफ इनवॉइस। दैट इज अनदर कंट्रोवर्सी which has to be settled by the court looking to the data language. Now comes phase to pay. As I told you, it's a very important term. Phase to pay means where I am under an obligation to pay the amount. If I have allowed you credit of 9 months, whether this 180 days, in the language it says from the date of invoice, but that amount has not become due. Now it's a pandemic. For example, I have given you goods on credit of 60 days, less than 180 days. But once I look at your financial problems which you are facing in this pandemic, I extend, okay, you can make me payment after 6 months. So this fails to pay, and 180 days from the date of invoice, These two seems to be very, very contradictory. Kindly try to appreciate it. One side he says you have to make the payment within 180 days. On the other side he says fails to pay. Once I am not under an obligation to pay, how can you say it is? As I told you, it can be pandemic, it can be installment, which can be for 12 months, which is beyond 6-month period. If the credit itself is for more than 180-day period, so there are certain judgment which says fails to pay means once you are liable to make the payment. If that amount has not become due, so again, this controversy needs to be resolved by the courts only. Then another question comes. This is the most important question which has been asked to me by the chartered accountants. Sir, मैंने तो 180 days में नहीं किया, रिवर्स भी नहीं किया, अक्टूबर में पेमेंट भी कर दी. अब जो मैंने 1 जनवरी को एडवाइस ली, जुलाई में वो रिवर्स होना चाहिए. जुलाई में मेरे सरकार को ये बनता था टैक्स, और जो मैंने अक्टूबर को दे दिया तो मेरी एलिजिबिलिटी आ गई, तो जो अक्टूबर में टैक्स दिया उसका रिफंड लूं और इसकी टैक्स की पेमेंट करूं या डिफरेंशियल इंटरेस्ट दे दूं. In my humble opinion, differential interest will suffice because you have already made the payment in the month of October and you have become eligible to avail that credit in the month of October. So the only thing is you have wrongly utilized the credit from July, August and September. So once I pay the interest, so this is one question which has really been asked to me by number of chartered accountants. So I am giving you my personal view. The department is not certainly going to get it accept. Department will certainly say, on 1st July, you have committed a mistake. On that day, the demand is there. I am creating a demand. And in case you have paid amount and that particular month you are eligible, then there is excess payment to the department, you claim a refund for that. But I am sure when the matter will reach to this constitutional court, not up to the tribunal level, the findings will certainly come in your favor. And the court will certainly say, you have got the money which you are entitled to. He has utilized your funds for 3 months. You charge interest to them on the principle of natural justice. So that can be done. And that approach may be litigative, but I personally feel at the end you will bear it. Now, the Supreme Court, taking a suo moto cognizance, extended the various dates for the purpose of filing appeal and other purposes. Whether that extension shall be applicable to this 180 days also. My humble opinion, if I intend to pay the tax, I don't have financial resources, my business has come to a standstill, I think court will take a lenient view, and on this ground, if the payment has been made subsequently, they may ask you not to reverse the credit. अभी वहां लिखा था कि this is not applicable in the case of RCM, क्योंकि वहां क्रेडिट मिलता ही पेमेंट के बाद है, तो पेमेंट का क्वेश्चन ही नहीं आता. But at the same time, let me make it clear to you. In section 25(4), any transaction between two registration under the same PAN are being treated as distinct person. आप सबको पता है, अब 4 साल हो गए हैं, आप कर ही रहे हैं बिलिंग. अगर लुधियाना वाला माल अपने स्टॉक को, अपने शोरूम को माल भेजता है गुड़गांव या नोएडा में, आप बिलिंग करते हैं, उससे जीएसटी चार्ज करते हैं, तो वहां भी ये 180 डेज एप्लीकेबल नहीं होता है, क्योंकि यू आर नॉट लायबल टू मेक द पेमेंट टू योरसेल्फ. थर्ड पार्टी इज नॉट इन्वॉल्व्ड. इट इज टू डिफरेंट रजिस्ट्रेशन अंडर द सेम पैन. तो वहां भी ये 180 डेज वाली कंडीशन नहीं लगती है, तो दूसरा आरसीएम में नहीं लगती है. नाउ वी आर कमिंग टू सेक्शन 16 सबसेक्शन 3. इन द केस ऑफ कैपिटल गुड्स ये वही प्रोविजन है जो जीएसटी से पहले था. इन केस यू वांट टू क्लेम द डेप्रिसिएशन एंड यू कैपिटलाइज दैट जीएसटी along with the value of machine, certainly you are not entitled for the credit. Yes, by doing so, how much loss I am causing, I have already explained it to you. Depreciation तो आपको मिलेगा 15% से 5% या 20% से, depending upon what is the rate of tax under income tax law. और otherwise वो क्रेडिट आपको पूरा ही मिल जाना था 100% in the year of purchase. तो ये अब इस पे भी बहुत सारे इश्यूज हैं. कुछ इश्यूज मैं लेटर ऑन डिस्कस करना चाहता था, पर मेरे दिमाग में आ रहा था, मैं कर लेता हूँ. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, कॉस्ट ऑफ द मशीन इज 1 lakh. Freight is 50,000. Installation charges is another, let us say 50,000. Now, total cost is 2 lakh. I am capitalizing 2 lakh as per the accounting practice. But whether this restriction, where I am availing the facility of transportation of that machine, उसको भी मैंने कैपिटलाइज किया, उसको क्रेडिट मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा? मेरे हिसाब से मिल जाना चाहिए, बिकॉज दिस क्लियरली सेज कैपिटल गुड्स, इसकी वैल्यू आपने कैपिटलाइज की है। अब उसकी इंश्योरेंस, फ्रेट सबका मिल गया, इंस्टॉलेशन का भी मिल जाना चाहिए, वो सर्विस है। अगर मैं उस मशीन को परमानेंटली फॉसन करता हूं मशीन के साथ, देन व्हाट डज इट बिकम? ये बॉक्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट बन गया। आपने एक मशीन पे लेबर लगाई, उसको ट्रांसपोर्टेशन कराई, इंस्टॉलेशन सर्विसेज दिया। ये कॉन्ट्रैक्ट सप्लाई इंस्टॉलेशन का एक आदमी को भी हो सकता था, जहां उसने 2 लाख रुपए आपसे चार्ज किए। इफ दैट बीइंग सो, तो क्या हुआ सर? अब ये वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट in terms of schedule 2 has become service. Am I eligible for the full amount of credit? This is undoubtedly a challenge. When a particular machine is being installed and the contract is for supply, erection, installation, and it becomes a WAS contract. If it is a WAS contract in relation to immovable property 2119, it's satisfied. Then it becomes service in terms of schedule 2. Whether by doing so, can I claim the depreciation on the plant and machinery which otherwise was not eligible to me? Anyway, so this is another challenge. Then time limit of credit. As I told you, 16.2 says non-obstinate clause, not anything contained in this section. But this section put up another condition, whether it is subject to the provisions of law or not. Ultimately, court will decide. But then it says you cannot claim the credit from the due date of filing the return for the month of September following the financial year for which the credit is being claimed. Since 2020 enactment, it is absolutely clear that the invoice and debit note both have been dealing now. So this time limit is independently applicable in the case of invoice as well as in the case of debit note. Now let us talk about certain challenges. A recipient has received a valid invoice, received the goods or services, made payment through check, whether he can still claim the credit. As I told you, Arise India and a couple of other cases which I'll be dealing in the slides to come, certainly you can claim the credit. Then what if not reflection is due to following reasons? Supplier has filed GSTR 3 correctly, but failed to show in GSTR 1. Are you eligible for the credit? अप्रैल में उसने माल दिया आपको, अप्रैल की जीएसटीआर 1 में वो दिखाना भूल गया, 3B में उसने दिखा दिया. You are having a proper duty paying document. You are satisfying all the conditions which is required. According to my understanding, even if you correct that mistake after 2 months, you are eligible for the credit in the month you purchase. Supplier inadvertently mentioned B2B, supply as B2C. Your GSTR number need to be mentioned in B2B invoice. Either you get the supplier copy of the invoice corrected. Certainly, ultimately, the demand cannot sustain on this amount also. Supplier captured wrong GSTN. As I told you, procedural mistakes will not be coming in your way. If the substantive condition being satisfied, you'll get the credit. Actual ITC is IGST, but supplied CGST, SGST. As I told you, in the hands of recipient, it cannot be challenged. You can create a demand in the hands of the supplier. So far as your credit is concerned, that cannot be stopped. Unfortunately, the department is issuing a lot more notices in this regard. So you can reply according to what I have suggested you. In case you want to add something more, you can do that in case something comes to your mind. Now, friends, not only this, the government has, this is one slide which I would like to slip because it is a huge topic and I had very limited time at my disposal. Now comes rule 36.4, which says you cannot claim the credit more than 5% of what has been reflected in your GC, in your 2A or 2B. वहाँ कहीं भी ये नहीं लिखा कि ये 2A में आना चाहिए या 2B में. It's the dilemma of the assessor. Of course, first of all, the question is whether 36.4 itself is valid. If I am satisfying all the conditions of 16.2 and ultimately after 3 months, he has rectified the GSTR 1 in my favor, in my humble understanding, this 2A, 2A or 2B will never come into your view. If the amount is small, of course you want to buy, don't buy the litigation, no problem. But in case it is a huge amount, my submission will be ignore this rule, claim the credit which is available. Now, as I told you, 2A or 2B, in my humble understanding, the department view is it is stated document 2B, you have to claim 105% of 2B, and even this figure is sometimes auto-populated in your 3B. But legally speaking, in my humble understanding, if the credit is appearing either in 2A or 2B, you are entitled for the claim without any restriction. Then very recently they have put up a condition under Rule 86P, you cannot utilize more than 99% of the credit balance available in the credit ledger of your tax liability. There are certain exceptions where you are not to do this, but again, once there is no such condition in 16.2, can you put up a condition like this in the rule, which goes beyond the scope of statutory provision? In my humble understanding, you cannot. So you can keep on claiming 100%. If the department object to it, we can go into litigation, win for you. But in case 1% is not a very huge amount for you, then try to follow this. Then comes blocking of credit. This is a very huge power which has been given to the proper officer. Of course, commissioner can grant this power to an officer not below the rank of assistant commissioner. In case he feels that you have taken a credit on the strength of invoice or debit note, wherein that supplier is not existent on that address, or you have recorded the invoice without receipt of goods, or input tax has been availed on the stack of tax invoice or debit note, in respect of which tax has not been paid to the government, or you have claimed credit on the basis of invoice which has been issued by the supplier who are non-existent at all, or not to be conducting from business from that place, or the registered person availing any credit of input tax is not in possession of tax invoice. वो तो ठीक है, tax invoice के बिना आप कैसे लेंगे? There may be a situation where you have lost the original tax invoice. You can take a copy of that and keep it in your record. According to my understanding, that will not. And in case that assistant commissioner feels that there are reasons to be recorded in writing, he can record those reasons and then say that you cannot utilize that. Such a draconian power has been given. Now the department has started using it also. But then, in case that is being done, you can file a reply to the proper officer, convince him that these conditions are no longer exist and this is the genuineness. He may allow you. In any case, once you put up these restrictions, they will expire after the expiry of 1 year, even if you don't reply to it. Now, friends, after looking at it, how to claim the credit, what is the amount of credit available to me? Now we are coming to the most important section, section 70. जिंदल जी कह रहे थे, राजेश जी भी कह रहे थे कि सीमलेस क्रेडिट की बात है. सीमलेस क्रेडिट कहाँ है? When you are paying custom duty, you are not eligible to claim it. Petroleum products are still outside the GST. There are block credit in section 17.5. So seamless credit nahi hai. There are so many restrictions and so many bottlenecks that each and every credit is not available to you. One is you are not entitled for the credit which is being used for any purpose other than business. Where the goods or services are both are used by the registered person. Why I am reading it, there is a purpose. Partly for the purpose of any business and conjunction add is being used. Partly for other purposes, the amount of credit shall be restricted to the extent used in business. Is it applicable to the common supplies or it is applicable to all the supplies? Anybody can answer, even in chat box. The language says where the goods or services are both are used by the registered person partly for the purpose of any business and partly for other purpose. So language, in my humble understanding, very clearly indicates that it is for the purpose of common supplies. Rule 40-43 also says that even in the pre-GST era, the Senate credit rule, the law was very simple. You are eligible to claim the full credit for all the supplies which has been used for the purpose of making taxable supplies, and you cannot avail any credit with respect to the supplies which has been used for exempted supply. It was apportionment of common services only. And this law was developed, this General Credit Rules came into effect on 2004. And ultimately, this amendment came quite late. I think somewhere near 2016. After 12 years, the government realizes it is the common services which are subject matter of portion. So I think it is the same. But unfortunately, when that rule was so clear, you are not eligible for any credit which is being used for exempt supply, there is no statutory provision suggesting that. Even Rule 42 and 43 doesn't talk about so clearly. If you look at the title of those rules, that also talk about in the same fashion in which the 71 and 2 is being drafted. So, in the absence of any statutory provision, tomorrow you can say a chartered accountant who is doing trading in share also, because that is the exempted supply in terms of section 73. But there is no rule where I have to reverse it. Why should I reverse the credit? Even for the common services that has been used for that purpose. But yes, I will say my experience is that once the department intend to collect tax on a particular activity and there is some drafting error, it is being rectified subsequently with retrospective effect. So take a conservative view. Why I am saying so, I'll give you a couple of examples. In the case of renting of immovable property, when the case of first home solution decision, they say renting per se is not taxable. At that point of time, Finance Act 2010 amended the law retrospectively by including renting per se and any service in relation to rent. Similarly, commercial training and coaching center, the definition says it should not be charitable. They say charitable by nature nahi. Once they are earning consideration by providing the commercial training and coaching, then it is charitable. The the supplier status as charitable has got no meaning. जब ये लॉ लिटिगेशन चली तो उन्होंने फिर अमेंडमेंट 2007 एक्ट में कर दी विद इफेक्ट फ्रॉम 1 जुलाई 2003. और इनकम टैक्स में तो शायद ही कोई साल आता है कि जहां अमेंडमेंट इफेक्टिव नहीं होती, और कई बार तो 50 साल पीछे तक चली जाती. तो मेरा ये कहना है कि अगर यहाँ एक प्रोविजन में गलती रह गई कि आपको एग्जम्प्टेड सप्लाई के लिए डिसअलाउंस नहीं किया गया, and it is certainly the language according to me is fairly clear that this 71 applies to the common services. So going by the rule which is in the spirit of law, we can assume the status is full credit for taxable supplies, no credit for exempted supplies, and reversal has to be made for the common services in terms of Rule 42 and 43 when it is being used for other than purpose, and then 17.2 says when you are engaged in taxable and exempt supply. In the case of taxable supply, zero rated supply, which are export, though no tax is payable, but being included in the definition of taxable supply. For example, 100 rupees is my turnover, wherein I am paying tax local. 100 rupees is my export, zero rated supplies, including SEZ and export. And 100 rupees is my exempt supply. So I am liable to pay tax only, I am liable to reverse the credit only 1/3 of the common services. Whatever has been used for exempt supply fully to be disallowed, 1/3 of common services, whatever has been used directly in making zero rated supply and taxable supply, full credit shall be. तो ये व्यू लेना चाहिए, और ये कंजर्वेटिव व्यू है. That with Rule 40 and 43, Rule 42 and 43, it gets support also, and it is in consonance with the earlier law which was there in the pre-GST era. So in my humble opinion, the court will take that view only, and they will not go to the technical aspect of this language. Section 17.3 says how to calculate the value of exempt supply. ने तो कह दिया कि अगर आपने एग्जम्प्ट और टैक्सेबल दोनों सप्लाई की है तो आपको प्रोपोर्शनली क्रेडिट लेना है. बट एग्जम्प्ट सप्लाई की वैल्यू में उन्होंने ये कह दिया कि वैल्यू विल बी एज मे बी प्रेस्क्राइब्ड. उन्होंने कह दिया सिक्योरिटीज के केस में 1%, लैंड के केस में सर्कल रेट, तो उसी हिसाब से उसको कैलकुलेट करेंगे और ये भी कह दिया कि रिवर्स चार्ज पे जो सर्विसेज लायबल है दे विल नॉट बी shall be such as may prescribed and shall include supplies on is liable to be tax and reverse charge. तो जो रिवर्स चार्ज की जो वैल्यू है वो भी आपके पास इंक्लूड होगी एंड ट्रांजैक्शन इन सिक्योरिटी सेल ऑफ लैंड ये भी आएगा, उसके रूल भी उन्होंने बना दिए कैसे इंक्लूड करना है, सब्जेक्ट टू क्लॉज बी ऑफ पैराग्राफ 5 ऑफ शेड्यूल 2, जो ये कहता है कि बिल्डर की जो सर्विसेज व्हेन यू आर रिसीविंग द कंसिडरेशन बिफोर कंप्लीशन सर्टिफिकेट दैट शुड आल्सो बी, देन एन एक्सप्लेनेशन हैज बीन इंसर्टेड which says for the purpose of this subsection the value of exempt supply shall not include the transaction specified in schedule 3. Why? The question was being asked to the department that once these activities are neither supply of goods nor supply of services, and 17.2 talk about apportionment only when you are providing exempt services and taxable supplies. So certainly they say schedule 3 will not be included except paragraph 5, which is an exception. Schedule 5 paragraph and schedule paragraph 5 of schedule 3 is absolutely identical. Builder wherein you are receiving the consideration before completion or first occupancy is subject to tax. Then 17.4, it is absolutely on the line of pre-GST era, which says in the case of banking and financial companies and banks, they have been given an option. Either they can disallow 50% of their credit or they can apply the formula as given in 17.1 and 17. Either of these they can do. But once they have chosen any method, that method cannot be reversed during the remaining part of the financial year. Now comes the most controversial and most important section from chartered accountant point of view, and it is nothing but block credit. It starts with the non-obstain clause. Notwithstanding anything contained subsection 1 of section 16 or subsection 1 of section 3. Section 16(1) अभी हमने पढ़ा था, every registered person is liable to claim the credit of all supplies used or intended to be used in the course of further of business. बहुत वाइड था, बट उन्होंने कह दिया जो मर्जी वहां लिखा हो, अगर वो यहाँ लिख दिया हमने तो 16(1) नहीं प्रिवेल करेगा और उसका आपको क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा. पहली क्लॉज, मोटर व्हीकल फॉर ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ पर्सन्स हैविंग अप्रूव्ड सीटिंग कैपेसिटी ऑफ नॉट मोर देन 13 आदमियों से कम की जो मोटर व्हीकल है, ये क्लॉज सिर्फ उसी पे लगती है. तो ये बसेस हैं या जो 13 से ज्यादा की सीटिंग कैपेसिटी वाली व्हीकल्स है, कैरी आउट द पैसेंजर, मे बी सम टेम्पो ट्रैवलर, मे बी सम बसेस, मे बी सम डिलक्स बसेस, उनके ऊपर ये क्लॉज एप्लीकेबल नहीं है. तो पहले तो इस बात को समझ लें, बहुत बार क्वेश्चन आता है सर इस बस का क्रेडिट मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा. 17(5)(a) तो उस बस पे एप्लीकेबल ही नहीं है. इट इज एप्लीकेबल ओनली ऑन दी मोटर व्हीकल. मोटर व्हीकल एज डिफाइंड इन मोटर व्हीकल एक्ट, उसकी भी बात करते हैं और तब हमें पता चलेगा कि उसमें से बहुत सारी चीजें इसमें से निकाल दी गई हैं. तो पहली बात वो कहता है मोटर व्हीकल जो ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ पर्सन्स having approved seating capacity of not more than 13%, it is applicable only to that, including the driver. अब इसमें भी पहले तो 13 से ऊपर वालों को क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा, तो जब क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा तो उनके इंश्योरेंस रिपेयर वगैरह का भी इस पे कोई रिस्ट्रिक्शन नहीं है. तो ये दिक्कत आ गई. अब पहली बात तो ये आ गई कि ये मोटर व्हीकल जो है वो 13 आदमियों से कम की सीटिंग कैपेसिटी का होना चाहिए. उसमें भी एक्सेप्शन दे दी. अगर कोई आई एम बाइंग दैट मोटर व्हीकल फॉर फर्दर सप्लाई, एक कार का डीलर है, आजकल सारी गाड़ियां हैं, कहाँ 13 आदमी बैठते थोड़ी होते हैं, 5 आदमी बैठते हैं. तो ये सारी गाड़ियां अगर वो डीलर खरीदता है उसके ऊपर ये प्रोविजन एप्लीकेबल नहीं है, उसको क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा. फिर आया ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ पैसेंजर्स. इफ आई एम एंगेज इन द बिजनेस ऑफ ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ पैसेंजर, मैं टैक्सी का काम कर रहा हूँ, रेंट ए कैब कर रहा हूँ या कुछ कर रहा हूँ, उसको भी क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा. थर्ड इज ट्रेनिंग कॉलेज. अगर वो ट्रेनिंग कॉलेज चला रहा है, उस गाड़ी को यूज कर रहा है एज ए बिजनेस एसेट और उसी के ऊपर बिठा के अपने क्लाइंट्स को ट्रेनिंग देता है, those are being driven by persons who don't know the driving, chances of accident and misuse is more. So उन केसेस में भी उन्होंने ये कह दिया कि उनको भी अब क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा। तो क्या बचा जिस पे क्रेडिट नहीं मिलना है? मोटर व्हीकल फॉर ट्रांसपोर्टेशन पैसेंजर लेस देन 13 persons and not covered in these exceptions like chartered accountants, doctors, engineers, or even the car to be used by the MD etc. उन सब का क्रेडिट नहीं मिलता। अब मोटर व्हीकल अगर फैक्ट्री की बात करते हैं तो बहुत सारे व्हीकल आते हैं। अब इस डेफिनेशन को पढ़ना इंपॉर्टेंट है। It says, it's an exhaustive definition, means any mechanically propelled vehicle adopted for use upon roads. जो व्हीकल रोड के ऊपर आती है, यानी जो व्हीकल जो क्रेन आपके अंदर चलती है, ट्रेन पे चलती है, वो सब व्हीकल नहीं आएंगे। यहाँ सिर्फ वो व्हीकल आएंगे जो रोड पे चलने हैं, whether the power of propulsion is transmitted thereto from an external or internal source and include a chassis to which the body has not been attached and a trailer, but does not include a vehicle upon fixed rail. जो ये सामान कैरी करने के लिए वो होते हैं अंदर, या जो क्रेन्स होती है, बॉक्स क्रेन्स या मटेरियल क्रेन्स, वो सब जो रोड पे नहीं चलती। अब ये कहेंगे रोड से चला के लाए थे, वो नहीं, विच इज बिंग नॉट मेंट टू बी रन ऑन रोड। तो उन सब के ऊपर ये क्लॉज नहीं लगती। Whether they are run on fixed rail or a special type adopted for use in a factory in any other enclosed premises, vehicle having less than 4 wheels, fitted with medium capacity of not exceeding 25 cubic centimeter. तो 25 cubic centimeter से ज्यादा अगर उसकी कैपेसिटी कम है और उसके 4 व्हील से भी कम है तो वो भी मोटर व्हीकल में कवर नहीं। बट मोटरसाइकिल with a capacity of more than 25 basic cube will certainly be covered and credit shall not be allowed. फिर आ गया ए क्लॉज, जहां वो बात करता है वेसल्स एंड एयरक्राफ्ट एक्सेप्ट व्हेन दे आर यूज्ड फॉर मेकिंग द फॉलोइंग टैक्सेबल। नंबर 1, वेसल और एयरक्राफ्ट को भी क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा unless otherwise they are being used for the further supply of such vessel and aircraft. So any person who is dealing in the aircraft will get the credit. Used for transportation of passengers, airlines will get the credit. Imparting training on navigating such vessel or training on flying such aircraft. So all those institutions which are engaged into the aircraft training and they purchase a dummy aircraft or old aircraft for the purpose of training, they will also get the credit. And finally, when these vessels and aircrafts are being used for transportation of goods. मोटर व्हीकल में उन्होंने less than 13 persons manufactured for the purpose of carrying passenger, वहां गुड्स वाले व्हीकल लिए ही नहीं थे। गुड्स वाले पे तो रिस्ट्रिक्शन है ही नहीं। और यहाँ वेसल एंड एयरक्राफ्ट में भी उन्होंने कह दिया इफ दे आर बीइंग यूज्ड फॉर ट्रांसपोर्टेशन ऑफ गुड्स तो उनके ऊपर भी कोई रिस्ट्रिक्शन नहीं है, दे कैन आल्सो क्लेम द क्रेडिट। Then from February 2019, this route is only for the limited period 1st July to 31st January 2019. Now they have made it very clear कि जहां ये कैपिटल गुड्स का क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा वहां आपको जनरल इंश्योरेंस, सर्विस, रिपेयर एंड मेंटेनेंस का भी क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा, एक्सेप्ट उन्होंने क्लॉजेस डाल दी। नंबर 1, दे से अगर आप स्पेसिफिक पर्पस के लिए यूज कर रहे हैं, जो हमने ऊपर डिस्कस किया, यानी आप डिसअलाउंस में आते ही नहीं है तो रिपेयर वैसे ही मिल जाएगी। और अगर आप डिसअलाउंस में आते भी हैं लेकिन आप मैन्युफैक्चरर है मोटर व्हीकल, फॉर एग्जांपल मारुति है, अगर वो वारंटी में रिपेयर्स करती है, वो मैन्युफैक्चरर है या इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज है, उनको ये रिस्ट्रिक्शन नहीं लगेगी। पर जनरल इंश्योरेंस सर्विसिंग और रिपेयर की सर्विस उनके हाथ में इनपुट सर्विस होगी जिससे क्रेडिट वो ले पाएंगे, चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट नहीं ले पाएंगे। ये मैं फिर बात एक बार रिपीट कर देता हूँ कि आपके गाड़ी की इंश्योरेंस कार एक्सपेंसेस आपके क्लाइंटों का नहीं मिलेगा अनलेस अदरवाइज योर क्लाइंट इज अ व्हीकल मैन्युफैक्चरर और ही इज ए इंश्योरेंस कंपनी। Then comes clause B, wherein certain expenses have been disallowed. If we talk about food and beverages, outdoor catering, beauty treatment, health services, cosmetic and plastic surgery, leasing, renting and hiring a motor vehicle, then life insurance and health insurance, ये जो 8 सर्विसेज हैं इनका क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा। बट अगर वो सारे खर्चे भी लिख सकते थे एक जगह पे, 3 जगह क्यों लिखा? क्योंकि हर एक के साथ कंडीशन अलग है। इन 8 खर्चों का क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा अगर आप इन्हीं की सप्लाई में डील करते हैं या आप कोई कंपोजिट सप्लाई और मिक्स सप्लाई देते हैं जिसका ये पार्ट है और जिसके ऊपर टैक्स डिस्चार्ज हो रहा है. So these expenses are not allowable in the case of a chartered accountant. But in case you are a dealer of outdoor catering, आपने कहीं बड़ी आउटडोर कैटरिंग ले ली, सब कॉन्ट्रैक्टर एम्प्लॉय कर लिया, आपको क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा. ऐसे कॉस्मेटिक एंड प्लास्टिक सर्जरी में, ऐसे लीजिंग एंड रेंटिंग ऑफ मोटर व्हीकल में. तो अगर आप उस सर्विस में डील कर रहे हैं या ऐसी सर्विस में डील कर रहे हैं वेयर इट बिकम्स अ पार्ट ऑफ दैट कंपोजिट और मिक्स सप्लाई, देन यू आर एलिजिबल फॉर द क्रेडिट. मेंबरशिप ऑफ ए क्लब, हेल्थ एंड फिटनेस सेंटर, ये किसी भी सिचुएशन में नहीं मिलेगा, कोई कंडीशन नहीं है. ट्रैवल बेनिफिट टू द एम्प्लॉयज ऑन वेकेशन सच एज एलटीसी, वो भी क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा. एक प्रोविजो लगा दिया विच इज एप्लीकेबल टू 1 2 3 ऑल. अगर लॉ ने कोई चीज मैंडेट की है और आप वो प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं तो आपको खर्चा मिल जाएगा. फॉर एग्जांपल, इफ वी टॉक अबाउट आउटडोर कैटरिंग सर्विसेज, आई एम नॉट ए आउटडोर कैटरर बट आई एम ए फैक्ट्री ओनर. Under the labor laws, I am supposed to maintain a canteen. You are eligible for the credit because the law has told you you are employing a specified number of persons, which mandates that you have to maintain a canteen in which you are receiving the outdoor catering services. You are certainly eligible for the credit because the law has provided. So this proviso is for 1 2 3 all. Wherever the law has provided any service which falls under these expenses for which the credit is blocked, I will get the credit and this restriction shall not apply. Now comes very important service, works contract service. When supplied for construction of immovable property, except when it is for further supply of works contract, ये भी कह दिया other than plant and machinery. So, अगर एक चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट अपना ऑफिस बनवाता है और वो चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट दे देता है कि भैया यू हैव टू सप्लाई द होल मटेरियल, यू हैव टू कंस्ट्रक्ट माय ऑफिस, यू हैव टू डू द इंटीरियर, you have to fix up the equipments, then the whole contract, because works contract has been defined very widely in 2119, which includes 14 activities, including construction, erection, commissioning, installation, completion, fitting out, repair, maintenance, renovation, alteration, building, fabrication, etc. So ये 14 जो आइटम मैंने आपको बताई, अगर उन 14 आइटम को मैंने एक आदमी को दे दिया और वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्टर इन रिलेशन टू इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी, आई एम नॉट एलिजिबल फॉर दिस unless otherwise I am a builder. If I am a builder, I am receiving this service, providing service to my intending buyer, I will certainly be eligible for the credit because the Supreme Court in L&T said involvement of the land does not denude it and does not bring it out of the works contract service. अब क्वेश्चन आता है कि in the case of chartered accountant, what should be the reasonable mechanism? So my suggestion will be, you can give construction or building etc. to a contractor who can do that. So far as furniture, fixtures, other things are concerned, you can make purchases from the dealers. Once you do that, then it does not fall into the definition of works contract. You will be eligible for the credit. You can buy furniture, credit is available. You buy even waste paper bucket, credit is available. You buy a computer, you buy a fax machine, you buy a laptop, whatever you want to buy, which does not form part of the immutable property. Maybe certain interior work which is embedded with the earth and the roof and make it part of immutable property which cannot be removed without substantial damage. Barring that, all these credits can be made available to you. So be wise in the case of construction of any factory building, any office, take care whatever material you can purchase and which is purely a sale transaction, you must segregate that supplies from that part so that you can eligible to pay. So far as works contract is concerned, Odisha High Court in the case of Safari Realtors has given another judgment which is there when 17.5 was also there. they have considered the GST law. They have considered this exclusion clause also. Still they say, once there is an exception, a builder who is giving the or selling the flat to the intending buyer, I'm talking about commercial property because after 1st April 19, residential properties, you're liable to pay tax either 1% or 5% without credit. Credit is not at all available. So forget about that builder who deals in residential project. I'm talking about the builders who deals in commercial projects. If he is executing a commercial project, then he will get the credit for the services paid to the contractor who has physically constructed that building, and the rate of tax is 18%, a substantial amount. In the case of Spari Realtors, the Odisha High Court said, so once this facility is available to the builder who is getting revenue which is subject to GST, then why this credit is not available to a person who is constructing a commercial mall which he has given on lease, and that lease rental is subject to GST? Why this chain is being broken? He is also earning revenue for the government. So he should also be eligible for the credit. And then they say the spirit of the law is seamless credit, barring certain exceptions. So on these two grounds, he has been given. Now the matter is pending before the Honorable Supreme Court. So wherever your client is facing these problems and can shift his business to Odisha High Court, he can do. He go to the jurisdiction of Odisha High Court, do his business there and claim the credit. Alternatively, my suggestion will be keep the issue alive. आप अपने वर्क इन प्रोग्रेस के दो पार्ट बना लें. Work in progress in terms of payment made to the contractor, work in progress in relation to the credit. And that credit, once it is being availed, then you are circumventing the limit of section 16(4) also. और आपने उस क्रेडिट को अपनी बुक्स में ले भी लिया है, रिटर्न में भी दिखा दिया है. Don't utilize it, because once you utilize, then you may be liable to pay the interest. If you don't utilize it, और आप उस क्रेडिट को कैरी फॉरवर्ड करते हैं, tomorrow if the judgment comes in your favor, you can use it for any purpose, for any business. As I told you, it is indivisible, availed rightly at the time when it was being availed. One-to-one correlation is not required, and even setting up a new business, you can use the credit. So this is the suggestion which I am giving to my clients who are acting as a builder. I think if you find it useful, you can also use it for your client. Then comes clause D. People are very smart. The government realizes that I can do one thing. I can give you a construction contract for pure labor services. I can buy the building material myself. By doing so, if the restriction is with regard to the works contract, then I am circumventing this provision very easily, and I am buying the building material in my own name and then claiming the credit. I am not falling there. So the government, being wiser now, they have said, in case you are buying the material which you are using it for the construction of immovable property except plant and machinery, in that case, you are not eligible for the credit of tax paid on the supply of those material also. Then there has been an explanation which has been inserted, wherein, because the exception is the plant and machinery, so they say plant and machinery for the purpose of this means apparatus, equipment and machinery fixed to earth by foundation or structural support and are used for making further supply. आपने कोई plant and machinery लगा ली और उसको आप use कर रहे हैं further supply के लिए, certainly you are eligible for the credit. This restriction of WCT will not be applied to you. However, it excludes. That means these are again subject to restriction of credit. जब उन्होंने कहा प्लांट एंड मशीनरी पे नहीं मिलेगा, फिर एक्सक्लूजन में से एक्सक्लूजन निकाल दिया. दैट मींस नाउ दीज आर टैक्सेबल. व्हाट आर दीज? लैंड, बिल्डिंग और एनी अदर सिविल स्ट्रक्चर. टेलीकम्युनिकेशन टावर. अगर टेलीकम्युनिकेशन टावर आप लगा रहे हैं, आप इसको प्लांट मशीनरी में इंक्लूड भी कर ले, तब भी हम क्रेडिट नहीं देंगे. देन पाइपलाइन लेड आउटसाइड द फैक्ट्री प्रीमाइसेस. जो फैक्ट्री प्रीमाइसेस के बाद पाइपलाइन लगाई है, मे बी फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ ट्रांसमिटिंग योर रॉ मटेरियल और एनीथिंग which is liquid, तो वो पाइपलाइन के लिए भी आपको क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा. सो इन तीनों के ऊपर क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा. प्लांट एंड मशीनरी पे क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा. फिर उन्होंने ये भी कह दिया कि in the case of repair, which is in the nature of works contract, it is not necessarily you construct a new building. चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट हैं और वो अपने ऑफिस की रिपेयर कराना चाहते हैं. जब आप रिपेयर कराते हैं तो उसमें भी आप बहुत सारा खर्चा करते हैं. समटाइम्स यू कैपिटलाइज इट, समटाइम्स यू क्लेम इट एज ए रेवेन्यू एक्सपेंडिचर. In case you want to avail the ITC, then you need to capitalize that expenditure, because in case you treat it as a revenue expenditure, तो आपको revenue ITC will be allowed, and capitalized no ITC will be allowed. So you have to claim it as a revenue expenditure only. अब income tax का issue आएगा कि whether that revenue expenditure is permissible or not, looking to the facts. So that is another challenge which you have to see. But wherever there is a marginal case, you can treat it as a revenue expenditure, then claim the GST also. अब जो next clauses है EFG, ज़्यादा technical नहीं है. अगर आप कंपोजिशन डीलर वाले से सप्लाई रिसीव कर रहे हैं तो आपको क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा. अगर कोई नॉन रेजिडेंट टैक्सेबल पर्सन कोई सप्लाई रिसीव कर रहा है एक्सेप्ट द गुड्स व्हिच हैज बीन इंपोर्टेड बाय हिम, ही इज नॉट एलिजिबल फॉर द क्रेडिट. एनी गुड्स एंड सप्लाईज व्हिच हैव बीन रिसीव्ड फॉर पर्सनल कंजम्पशन, नो क्रेडिट. एंड नाउ कम्स द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट एंड कंट्रोवर्शियल क्लॉज, गुड्स लॉस्ट, stolen, destroyed, written off. Then comes conjunction or, disposed of by way of gift or precept. So I will read it: goods lost, stolen, destroyed, written off, one part. Disposed of by way of gift and disposed of by way of precept. Lost, stolen, destroyed, ये सेम लैंग्वेज यूज थी रूल 7(3) में दिल्ली वैट में, यहाँ हमें क्रेडिट नहीं मिलता था. अब इन्होंने एक वर्ड ऐड कर दिया, रिटर्न ऑफ. तो वो केसेस लग नहीं सकते क्योंकि कुछ ये रिटर्न ऑफ है. नाउ द क्वेश्चन इज, ए पर्सन who has achieved death, maybe because of natural reason, maybe because of unnatural reason. In both the cases, body has to be disposed of. Same is the case here. Whether the goods have lost due to normal reasons, that is due to theft, stolen, destruction by fire, or goods have been lost otherwise, then it has to be written off. Anything I am purchasing something, it has got out of order, it cannot be, it's beyond repair, I have to write it off. So this written off word is very wide. So every asset which is being written off in the books of account, do I need to reverse the credit? In my humble understanding, the answer is no, because this written off will take its color from the goods lost, stolen, and destroyed, and therefore written off. Then only you can say that the credit is not available, but otherwise the credit will be available. Disposed of by way of gift, बहुत सारी schemes हैं. Buy 2 shirt, get 1 trouser free. Buy 2 toothpaste, get 1 detergent free. Buy 2 shampoo, get 1 free. Are they really free? In my humble understanding, this is a contractual obligation where you are making me payment for 2 items, wherein there is already a consideration of the 3rd item which I am giving you free. You are entitled for that free item only when you fulfill your obligation of buying the 2 items. If you do that, then only you are eligible for the gift. So it is a contractual obligation, and being a contractual obligation, it does not fall into the definition of gift. So certainly the credit is available. Similarly, distribution of sample to the dealers or giving gift to the traders, manufacturers, associates, business associates, etc. So in case they are all linked with the business and we can prove it is for the purpose of business, certainly no credit is, reversal is required. But once you are giving it as a gift, gift means without consideration, gratuitous act, voluntarily, without any obligation on my part. If all these parameters are being satisfied, then only it is a gift, then only the reversal is required. Free sample, we all know this is a practice which is there in pharma. But in this case also, there is some planning which can be possible. If you give sample from the head office, then you have to reverse the credit on the supplies used for the manufacture of those pets. The cost may be 20%, 30%. So the reversal may be very less. But in case you transfer those assets to the head office and then to your other offices, and then they will be given, then it is a transaction between two distinct persons of the same pan. There you have to apply the valuation mechanism. At open market value will be the price on which you have to pay the tax. Simply because these samples will not be used for those associate offices for their own purpose. So credit is not available. The benefit of second provision to Rule 28, which says if the transaction is between two distinct persons, where the other distinct person is liable to get the credit, the invoice value shall be treated as the open market value. That benefit shall not be available. So this kind of planning can be done in the case of sample. Then 17.5I says in case you are liable to make payment of tax, where in section 74, 129 and 30. That means what is 74? 74 means issuance of no-call notice for non-payment of tax, short payment of tax, erroneous claim of refund, a wrong claim of credit due to fraud, willful misstatement, and suppression. Similarly, confiscation of goods, etc. उसका भी credit आपको नहीं मिलेगा. 17.6 says the government prescribe the manner how it's to be calculated. This allows in terms of section 1 and 2, that is non-business and exempt supply, etc. उसके लिए उन्होंने रूल बनाई दिए 40 to 43, वो हमने डिस्कस कर. अब ये क्वेश्चन आता है, CGST and SGST of other state cannot be claimed as ITC. ये क्वेश्चन दो अथॉरिटी ऑफ एडवांस रूलिंग के सामने किया गया और दोनों ने कह दिया कि ये क्रेडिट नहीं मिल सकता. मैं आपको एक्सप्लेन करता हूँ. आप दिल्ली में हैं, सर्विसेज कर रहे हैं, सप्लाई दे रहे हैं, चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट है. आप एक केस आर्ग्यू करने के लिए बॉम्बे गए. बॉम्बे में आप होटल में रुके, वहां खाना वाना खाया. क्योंकि होटल वाले ने बिल बनाया, उसने CGST SGST महाराष्ट्र का लगा दिया और उसका क्रेडिट दिल्ली में तो नहीं मिलेगा. क्यों नहीं मिलेगा? इन अथॉरिटी ने ये कहा कि 16(1) कहता है कि एवरी रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन इज लायबल टू पे टैक्स. So once you are not registered in GST of Maharashtra, then you are not eligible for the claim. But my question is whether that provision is applicable to CGST and IGST also. Why that central credit is not being allowed to be? IGST, they are allowing the credit. Then why this practice is not being followed to CGST? That is one question. But beyond the conservative side, don't claim the credit. Credit of capital goods, I have already dealt with that. कि transportation का जो खर्चा किया, सर्विस है, अगर मैं उसको कैपिटलाइज कर देता हूँ, कल को डिपार्टमेंट कहेगा कि आपकी मशीनरी की वैल्यू 10 और आपने कैपिटलाइज 1 लाख किया, उसका क्रेडिट मिलेगा. In my humble opinion, you get the credit, and similarly, you'll get the credit for installation services also. जो हम बात कर रहे थे, डिफिकल्टी में भी हमने डिस्कस किया कि जहां मैंने सप्लाई रिसीव कर ली, पेमेंट कर दी, इनवॉइस ड्यूटी भी मेरे पास है, मैंने अपने रिटर्न भी फाइल कर दी, मैंने सारी कंडीशन सेटिस्फाई कर दी, तो क्या फॉर द फॉल्ट ऑफ सेलर मुझे क्रेडिट मिलना चाहिए? ये इशू मैं पहले डिस्कस कर सकता हूँ. राइज इंडिया में मैंने कह दिया था. नाउ देयर इज अनदर जजमेंट ऑफ क्वेस्ट मर्केंडाइजिंग इंडिया प्राइवेट लिमिटेड. दिस इज अगेन दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट saying the same position, and according to my understanding also this credit is available. So looking at the time constraint, I am now rushing. The JC कितना टाइम क्वेश्चन आंसर के लिए छोड़ना है? अपने पास है क्वेश्चन आंसर कुछ? राजेश जी
14 क्वेश्चन है, 14 क्वेश्चन है सर.
चलिए फिर मैं इस स्लाइडों को खत्म करके इश्यूज को क्वेश्चन आंसर.
जी सर, जी सर.
Then comes block credit used in construction. Safari retreat I have already dealt with, and there are other judgments also where they say that these services are available. Repair maintenance हमने डिस्कस कर लिया, इसको छोड़ देते हैं. हाँ, ये जो प्रोसेस का लॉस है, जब हम बात कर रहे थे, गुड्स लॉस्ट, स्टोलन, डिस्ट्रॉयड और रिटर्न ऑफ, तो क्वेश्चन आया कि जहां मैन्युफैक्चरिंग प्रोसेस में जो लॉस होता है उसका क्रेडिट मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा। तो पहले प्री जीएसटी इरा में बहुत सारी जजमेंट थी जो ये कहती थी उसका क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा बिकॉज दैट इज द प्रोसेस एंड नॉट unnatural loss, and the language of the law is goods lost, stolen, destroyed, three unnatural processes, और natural process का loss मिल जाएगा। अभी एक judgment आई है which I want to share with you. This judgment is only 4 days old, and this judgment is ARS Steel and Alloys International Private Limited versus Status of Interest. This is 2021 judgment, wherein the Madras High Court again reiterated the same position. You are eligible for the credit. And I think this judgment is important because it has come under GST law. This is my view also. Let's hurry it up. Transfer of credit on death of a provider. आपको नया नंबर लेना पड़ेगा और अगर आपने बिजनेस बंद करना है तो डिफरेंट प्रोसीजर है। अगर आप बिजनेस को कंटिन्यू करते हैं तो आपको नया नंबर लेना। मैंने कहा अगर कॉन्ट्रेक्चुअल ऑब्लिगेशन में है तो आपको क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा। देन गिफ्ट्स के रिलेटेड और सारे इश्यूज है, इसको छोड़ देते हैं अभी। सीएसआर का मैंने कहा क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा बिकॉज इट इज मैंडेटेड बाय लॉ। आई कैन नॉट रन माय बिजनेस विदाउट सीएसआर, सो दिस क्रेडिट इज आल्सो अवेलेबल। टाइम लिमिट, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल 16(4) इज बीइंग चैलेंज्ड इन व्यू ऑफ दिस नॉन ऑब्स्टेंट क्लॉज 16(2). इसमें सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज ये है कि ये जो 16(4) की जो लिमिट है इसको थोड़ा ध्यान से सुनेंगे जो लोग भी अटेंड कर रहे हैं। This is the most important part which I am going to state now. ये जो 16(4) की टाइम लिमिट है ये क्रेडिट की अवेलमेंट की तो है, बट इज इट इन द बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स और 3B? If I have claimed the credit in my ledger and cash book, filed my income tax return wherein I can prove I have already availed it, and I have not filed my ST3B, GSTR 3B, can you say because I am filing the return after the time limit prescribed in 16(4), I am not eligible for the credit? I, to be very frank, certainly don't agree with that view. In my humble opinion, availment of credit in the books of accounts is sufficient enough. Then another question is whether cess paid on purchase of coal can be claimed as a refund under inverted duty structure. This, I think, the issue is very complicated, and the court have to find out an answer. And very recently, as I told you, generation of electricity, coal पे मैंने GST दिया, which is being used in the residential colony adjacent to the factory. Furtherance of business की जब मैं बात कर रहा था तो मैंने ये केस ला को डिस्कस किया था. This is the citation of case law. This is only interim order where the company has been asked to pay part payment and rest is being stayed. With this, I am giving a full stop. I am not going further and deal with the provisions. Rest of the provision we will discuss whenever the next opportunity comes. But now we will take up question after session, and over to Rajesh ji for question answers.
जी भाई साहब बोलो सर, क्वेश्चन आंसर लोगे सर या अभी थोड़ी देर
हाँ
बाद?
जी, हाँ जी, क्वेश्चन आंसर ले लेंगे सर।
तो मैं पढ़ूं सर या आप डायरेक्ट लेंगे सर? आप पढ़ेंगे?
आप पढ़ते तो ज्यादा अच्छा सर।
नहीं मैं पढ़ देता हूं सर।
हाँ जी,
सुरेश जी का
क्योंकि वन वे ट्रैफिक चल रहा है ना।
नहीं सर,
में यही प्रॉब्लम है, वन वे ट्रैफिक चलता है तो कम से कम टू वे हो जाए थोड़ा सा।
सर सुरेश जी पूछ रहे हैं while filing GST CMP 08 ITC is available on portal and it is not possible to file return. ये तो क्वेश्चन ही क्या है?
मुझे नहीं पता, बट मैं ये कह सकता हूँ कि कंपोजिशन डीलर को तो वैसे ही कोई क्रेडिट नहीं मिलता है। अगर कंपोजिशन डीलर कन्वर्ट हो रहा है रेगुलर टैक्सेबल सप्लाई में तो उसका जो स्टॉक इनपुट इमीडिएटली प्रीसीडिंग द डेट है उसका क्रेडिट उनको मिल जाएगा, प्रोवाइडेड दैट इनवॉइस इज नॉट मोर देन 12 months old.
Next question, Sukhdev ji is asking, ITC in respect of invoice raised in March 21 by supplier but not showing in 2A 2B due to late filing of GSTR 1, who ultimately filed ballotlessly. What can be the consequence for not following Rule 36(4) and claiming ITC in March 21?
As I told you, as I told you, if you are satisfying the condition of section 16(2), आपके पास इनवॉइस है, गुड्स रिसीव हो गई है, उसने पेमेंट टैक्सी कर दिया, आपने रिटर्न फाइल कर दी है, तो कोई रीजन नहीं है आप इसको क्लेम ना करें। 36(4) तो आपको रिस्ट्रिक्ट करता है 5% of the eligible credit जो आपके 2A में आता है, तो 2A में नहीं आ पाया because of the non-filing of GSTR in time by the supplier. Ultimately, he will file GSTR1. हो सकता है 3B में उसने टैक्स भी उस पर दे दिया हो ठीक टाइम पे, पहले तो ये भी पता कर लें. And all these facts you keep it on record and claim the credit. No problem.
Next question, Dinesh ji asking, sir, service tax audit conducted in last week for period 16-17 up to June 2017 before GST and raised a demand on labor charges under RCM, which we are eligible to take ITC as per service tax rule. Please tell, can we take credit in GST of this? We have already filed trans 1. And what is procedure to get ITC of service tax is fully loss.
कोई सिस्टम नहीं है, कोई लॉस भी नहीं है. आप अगर पे करेंगे और आपको क्रेडिट अवेलेबल था, आपने नहीं किया तो पे मत करें और आप उसको लिटिगेट करें एंड यू से इन केस आई विल मेक द पेमेंट नाउ, आई विल बी एलिजिबल फॉर द रिफंड. So making payment and claiming refund is a futile exercise. In case at that point of time when you are supposed to make the payment, there is some less cash payment, तो आप उसके इंटरेस्ट की बात कर सकते हो. अदरवाइज आपको ये लिटिगेट करना पड़ेगा और जो रिलीफ मिलेगा वो आपको मिलेगा हाई कोर्ट में जाके ट्रिब्यूनल तक रिलीफ.
Next question, Ramesh Ahuja is asking, stock exchanges levy GST on expenses like transaction charges, broker engaged in own proprietary traders and client business. There being a common bill for expenses, whether input may be claimed for expenses charged to clients over and above self-consumption.
As I told you, if you are receiving any services which is being used for taxable and exempted, self-supply is a exempted service. So you have to apportion that credit in a rational manner.
Next question, Renu Sharma is asking, taxpayer has exempt supply, sale and all export, whether ITC can be claimed and refund also in case of without payment of IGST under LUT sale.
I couldn't get it. दोबारा बोलेंगे थोड़ा.
Taxpayer has exempt supplies, sale,
Okay.
and all export, whether ITC can be claimed.
Yes, certainly. If you are making export of exempted goods or services, even then Section 16(3) makes it very clear you are eligible to claim the credit of GST paid on the input and input services, not capital goods. That dispute is already going on. As I told you, Gujarat High Court in your favor, Madras against.
Next question, sir, Hitendra Thakkar ji पूछ रहे हैं, incentive oblique discount received on the basis of sale target achieved subject to GST.
As I told you, so far as you are concerned, you are getting a payment. Once you are getting a payment and it is in relation to the goods, now unlike in the past where incentive were not liable to be taxed because service tax was leviable only on the services, and we say the incentive is in relation to the goods. Now the subject matter of goods and services both comes under GST, so this receipt will be subject to tax.
Next question, Navneet Jeerat ji पूछ रहे हैं, Reliance Jio is providing fiber network to our office. The company is issuing an invoice with GST, but the company refused to include my GST number on the bill, citing that it is the personal name and I have taken their enterprise fiber network plan. I am losing GST input credit on such payment. This is contrary to other suppliers like Airtel and Vodafone, whose will allow GST input credit.
Credit will not be allowed unless you are having a proper duty-paying document to ask your supplier to give. So otherwise, change the supplier and shift to Airtel.
ठीक sir. Vijay Kumar is asking whether a proper officer can verify GSTR1 and e-way bill, and for any omissions he can issue SCN for mismatch.
देखिए, SCN issue करना डिपार्टमेंट का प्रेरोगेटिव है. Before they issue the SCN, they are supposed to conduct inquiry. You are supposed to respond in response to those inquiry notice. Whatever information is there, they will further carry out the investigation. If you are able to convince them, it is fine. Otherwise, nobody can stop them, and they always issue show cause notices, even on very illogical reasons.
Again, Vijay ji ka hi question hai, whether tax paid under reverse charge mechanism can be fully taken as ITC, and there are situations where it cannot be taken.
नो सर, आरसीएम भी एक टैक्स है जो रिसिपिएंट देता है बजाय सप्लायर के, इसके अलावा कोई डिफरेंस नहीं है. इफ इट फॉल्स इन द डेफिनेशन ऑफ इनपुट सर्विस, कैपिटल गुड्स और इनपुट, तो सब्जेक्ट टू द कंडीशंस जो हमने सारी डिस्कस की हैं आज, उसके हिसाब से आप क्रेडिट ले सकते हैं, उसमें कोई बात नहीं. आप आरसीएम को फॉरवर्ड चार्ज का ही टैक्स समझे, उसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं. अगर वो एलिजिबल ही नहीं है, फॉर एग्जांपल आपने आरसीएम में कोई टैक्स दिया फ्रॉम अनरजिस्टर्ड सप्लाई, तो आपको टैक्स, फॉर एग्जांपल इन द केस ऑफ 94 तो अभी है नहीं, 94 इज ओनली इन द केस ऑफ बिल्डर एक्सेट्रा. तो बिल्डर एक्सेट्रा में अगर वो कोई रिवर्स देता है तो फॉर्चुनेटली फॉर अस के रेजिडेंशियल प्रोजेक्ट में उसको 1% और 5% टैक्स देना है, क्रेडिट मिलना ही नहीं. बट अदरवाइज अगर आप जीटीए को कोई टैक्स देते हैं, एडवोकेट को कोई टैक्स देते हैं, इट इज ए इनपुट सर्विस फॉर यू कैन सर्टेनली क्लेम द क्रेडिट. और मैंने तो यहाँ तक कहा था कि अगर आपने जीटीए से कोई सर्विस दिया, वो इनपुट सर्विस है, भले ही आपने 5% भी दिया हो, उसको क्रेडिट मिले ना मिले, आपको उस 5% का क्रेडिट मिल जाए.
Next question, Neeraj Kumar Srivastav ji asking, sir, is service tax applicable on annual membership fees received by an incorporated members club after amendment made by the Finance Act 2021?
देखिए, ये तो चैलेंज की बात है. कुछ लोग तो ये कह रहे हैं कंसेप्ट ऑफ म्यूचुअलिटी भी चलेगा. यहाँ प्रोफेशनल ओपिनियन थोड़े से डिवाइडेड है. मैं ये कहता हूँ कि द डिपार्टमेंट द गवर्नमेंट इज वेरी क्लियर, इन स्पाइट ऑफ दैट कलकत्ता हाई कोर्ट, कलकत्ता सुप्रीम कोर्ट जजमेंट by largest bench, the government has amended the law. Now this language will also be tested by the court. Certainly one thing I can say with 100% confidence, if this matter will be litigated in the times to come. If you don't want to buy the litigation, amount is small, pay the tax, leave the litigation. But the department is not going to leave it. They say that after Saturday night, Saturday club, if the language has been amended, so this new law should be given its due, and you are liable to pay the tax. But certain professional feel, in spite of this amendment, the concept of mutuality still prevails. So obviously the litigation will continue.
Next question, Manoj Kumar Gupta ji, for registration purpose, sale of securities like share in mutual fund will be included in turnover of rupees 20 lakh.
Once again,
For registration purpose, sale of securities.
no, because security is not forming part of the GST. It is being excluded from the definition of goods. So that will certainly not be.
Hitendra ji
They are included only for the limited purpose of reversal of credit in 17.3. I think that it will not be.
हितेंद्र जी दोबारा पूछ रहे हैं, फॉर वर्क कॉन्ट्रैक्टर हु कंस्ट्रक्ट अफोर्डेबल हाउस रेट एप्लीकेबल इज 12% और 18%.
अफोर्डेबल हाउसिंग के लिए, रेजिडेंशियल के लिए 1% का केस है, 1% का टैक्स है, 1% विदाउट आईटीसी फॉर एनी प्रोजेक्ट व्हिच हैज बीन स्टार्टेड ऑन 1 अप्रैल 2019. अगर ये कॉन्ट्रैक्टर की बात कर रहे हैं जो कंस्ट्रक्ट कर रहा है फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ बिल्डर, तो 12%.
Next question, Vijay Kumar ji again asking, whether security service charges incurred in the work site, whether eligible for input tax credit.
Security charges?
Security charges incurred in the work site.
Why not?
Why not? Sure.
Certainly 100% कोई डाउट ही नहीं है. आप सिक्योरिटी सर्विसेज एंगेज कर रहे हैं, उनको टैक्स दे रहे हैं, तो क्रेडिट मिलेगा. This security service, I feel, I'm talking about security agency, not I'm talking about shares, etc. This security service at the site is certainly eligible for the credit.
Next question, there is anonymous attendee hai, there is huge difference of input tax credit in 2A and 2B. Is it correct to take the credit on 2A basis? Any additional liability in future?
देखिए, लॉ क्लियर नहीं है, मैंने आपसे पहले भी कहा है, पर मेरा ये मानना है कि अगर आप 16(2) की कंडीशन पूरी कर रहे हैं तो आपको क्रेडिट मिलेगा, कोई ताकत रोक नहीं सकती.
Next question, input tax credit taken wrongly in 3B in April 2020, not coming in either 2B or 2A. However, it has not been utilized for payment of output tax and reversed in May 2021. 3B, please guide. दोबारा पढ़ूं सर?
नहीं, गाइड किस लिए, मतलब जब आपने रिवर्स कर दिया, क्रेडिट ले लिया और वो क्रेडिट आपका चलता जा रहा है तो इंटरेस्ट नहीं लगेगा, किस्मत है कैसे। और क्योंकि डिपार्टमेंट ने एक्शन नहीं लिया, उससे पहले आपने रिवर्स कर दिया तो पेनल्टी भी नहीं लगेगी। रिवर्सल आपने कर ही दिया है, वेयर इज द डिस्प्यूट, व्हाट इज द क्वेश्चन।
चलो बाकी के सर छोड़ देते हैं, इन्होंने में ऐसे उनके नाम ही नहीं है। आई एम लिविंग बिकॉज दे आर नॉट प्रोवाइडिंग देयर नेम। सर एनीवे टाइम इज ऑल्सो 6:05 कंटिन्यूस 2 hours। थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू वेरी मच। मैं बता दूं सबको कि 2004 में जब हमने ये शुरू किया था तो फर्स्ट हमारा गिरीश आहूजा जी का था डायरेक्ट टैक्स पे, और सेकंड जो वेबिनार हमने अरेंज किया था बत्रा जी के साथ ही किया था, जब ये बीडनपुरा गली नंबर 44 में हुआ करते थे ऑफिस ऊपर। आई विजिटेड हिज ऑफिस टू इनवाइट हिम फॉर द वेबिनार सेमिनार। और शायद उस वक्त वेट नया ही नया आया था, वेट पे सर किताब भी लिख रहे थे। तो जब से एवरी ईयर हम सर को सुन रहे हैं, वही एनर्जी, मोर नॉलेज। With this, I once again welcome you, thanking you, and request our convener Hemant Pabaji for a formal vote of thanks, sir.
Thank you, Rajesh ji. I wholeheartedly thank Ashok Batra ji, who I know since my childhood. सीए इनको मैं जानता हूँ जब ये ऑथर से पहले, एज ए पर्सन आई न्यू हिम, और ही वाज वेरी नाइस, जेंटल फेलो, और ऑलवेज हेल्प्ड हिम व्हेन आई स्टार्टेड माय प्रैक्टिस एंड शावर्ड हिज ब्लेसिंग्स कि बेटा आ जा। और कभी कोई समस्या होती है तो आई यूज टू कॉल हिम अप, और अभी भी जो है वो उसी हिसाब से कभी फोन कर ले हम। और आज तो इन्होंने क्लॉज बाय क्लॉज पूरी जीएसटी की आईटीसी रिपीट करवा दी। वॉट एवर इट गोज आउट ऑफ माइंड नाउ इज इन द माइंड। और इनकी फर्स्ट बुक से लेके हर बुक हमारे पास लाइब्रेरी में है। जो जीएसटी के लिए बुक होता है तो अशोक बत्रा जी की बुक ही आती है, और वही पढ़ने के वो पता रहता है कि कहाँ पर क्या मिलेगा। एक बार हमें बुक सेलर कोई दूसरी दे गया तो उसकी वो आधी चीज तो पता ही नहीं लगी कहाँ पर है, वो बंद की बंद पूरा साल निकाल दिया उसने। So sir, thank you very much, and see forward ki we should receive your patronage in the same way in the future also, for giving your knowledge, imparting us with us, so that we are also enlightened in the future. Thank you, sir, for sharing the details.
Thank you, boss. Thank you. Thanks to all attendee.